3 weeks ago, a chemical that's been in food packaging for over 50 years became illegal to sell in most food packaging across an entire continent. In Europe, as of last month, it's banned. In the United States, the FDA still officially calls it safe. Same chemical, same studies, two of the most respected food safety agencies in the world looking at the identical evidence and arriving at opposite conclusions. That gap is the most interesting thing in food regulation right now, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why it exists and what it means for what's in your kitchen. The chemical is BPA, bisphenol A. If you've bought a plastic water bottle in the last decade, you've seen BPA-free stamped on it. That label exists because of this chemical. But here's what almost nobody explains: what BPA actually is, why Europe just banned it, why America hasn't, and the part that matters most, whether the science actually justifies the fear or whether this is another case of a headline outrunning the evidence. I'm going to walk you through all of it the way I read a regulatory file for a living. Let's start with what BPA is and where you meet it. BPA is a building block used to make two things: hard, clear polycarbonate plastic and epoxy resins. That second one is the important one. Epoxy resins are the lining inside metal food and drink cans, the thin coating that stops the metal from corroding and leaching into your food. That's not a niche use. That's most canned food on the planet. BPA is also in some reusable bottles, food storage containers, the adhesives and inks in packaging, and famously, thermal paper receipts. It is genuinely one of the most widespread synthetic chemicals in the food supply. And here's the thing that makes it a toxicology story, rather than a simple chemical bad story. BPA doesn't stay locked in the packaging. Small amounts migrate. They move from the container into the food, especially with heat, acidity, and time. So the question was never, is there BPA in the packaging? It's there. The question is the one this whole channel keeps coming back to: how much reaches you, and at what dose does it actually matter? Presence versus exposure. That's the entire ball game. Now to the science, and to the number that triggered the ban, because it's genuinely one of the most dramatic reversals in modern food regulation. In 2015, Europe's Food Safety Agency, EFSA, set what's called a tolerable daily intake for BPA, the amount you could consume every day of your life without expected harm. That number was 4 micrograms per kilogram of body weight. Then, in 2023, after a multi-year reevaluation, EFSA published a new number, not a little lower, 20,000 times lower, from 4 micrograms down to 0.2 of 1 nanogram per kilogram, 20,000-fold. To put that in perspective, that's not we refined the estimate. That's we now believe the safe dose is so small that ordinary dietary exposure across every age group in Europe blows past it by orders of magnitude, and that single reassessment is the scientific foundation for the ban that took effect last month. So what did EFSA find that justified dropping the safe level that far? Their reevaluation zeroed in on the immune system as the most sensitive target. Specifically, they identified an effect on a type of immune cell called Th17 cells, cells involved in inflammation and, when dysregulated, in autoimmune conditions and lung inflammation. In their analysis, BPA increased the proportion of these cells at very low doses in mice, and EFSA judged that to be the critical effect for setting the new limit. And now, Alvar, this is the part no wellness video will give you, and it's the most important part, yeah. That conclusion is not scientifically settled. It is actively, openly disputed by other serious regulators. Here's where reading the whole file matters. When EFSA circulated its draft, Germany's own risk assessment agency, the BfR, one of the most respected toxicology bodies in Europe, formally disagreed. So did the European Medicines Agency. Their objection was specific and frankly legitimate. Yes, BPA increases Th17 cells, but there is not convincing evidence that this particular change actually leads to a real adverse health outcome in animals or humans. In toxicology terms, they argued EFSA built the limit on an intermediate biological marker, a step in a hypothesized chain, without a demonstrated harmful endpoint at the end of that chain. The BfR ran the same data and came out with a safe dose estimate roughly 1,000 times higher than EFSA's, 1,000 times, on the same evidence. Sit with that for a second because it's the honest center of this whole story. This isn't fringe skeptics versus science. This is EFSA on one side and the German Federal Risk Agency plus the European Medicines Agency on the other, looking at one data set and disagreeing by 3 orders of magnitude about what's safe. When regulators of that caliber diverge that far, it doesn't mean one side is corrupt or stupid. It means the science sits in a genuinely uncertain zone, and the difference comes down to a judgment call. How much weight do you put on an early warning biomarker when the downstream harm isn't yet proven? EFSA chose maximum caution, the precautionary principle. The BFR chose to wait for a demonstrated adverse effect. Both are defensible scientific philosophies. They are not the same philosophy, which brings us straight to the Atlantic, because that philosophical split is exactly why Europe and America landed in opposite places. The EU, guided by EFSA and the precautionary principle, banned it. The United States, the FDA's current official position, as recently as 2025 designs, is that BPA is safe at the levels currently found in food. Same molecule, same published studies, and the American regulator sees no cause to act while the European regulator bans it outright. Neither agency is hiding the evidence. They are weighting uncertainty differently. Europe regulates the hazard when it's plausible. The US tends to wait for the risk to be demonstrated. This one chemical is the cleanest example you will ever find of those two regulatory worldviews producing opposite laws. So what do you, standing in your kitchen, actually do with all this? Let me give you the honest, non-panic version. First, the presence of BPA in your canned food is real, and if you want to reduce your exposure, that's a completely rational choice. And unlike a lot of what we cover, it's easy. Choose fresh or frozen over canned when you can. Look for cans explicitly labeled non-BPA lining. Don't microwave food in old polycarbonate containers, because heat drives migration. Those are low-effort, evidence-consistent moves. Second, and I have to be straight with you here, BPA-free is not the finish line it sounds like. When BPA got a bad reputation, many manufacturers swapped in chemical cousins like BPS and BPF. Those are less studied, structurally similar, and there's early concern they may carry comparable effects. Europe saw this coming, which is why the new regulation doesn't just ban BPA, it restricts the whole family of hazardous bisphenols, specifically to stop what regulators call regrettable substitution. A BPA-free label from a market without that rule may just mean they use the cousin nobody's measuring yet. And the honest bottom line, the one that respects both your intelligence and the actual state of the evidence, BPA is not a proven poison that's been giving you diseases, and anyone telling you that is overstating what we know. But it's also not the settled non-issue the packaging industry would prefer, because the most cautious major food regulator on Earth just looked hard and decided the safe dose is effectively 0. The truth lives in that tension. Europe acted on caution. America is waiting on proof. The science underneath is real, but genuinely unsettled. Knowing where the certainty ends is worth more than any label on the front of the box. This channel exists to read the regulatory file so you don't have to tell you what's actually banned, what's actually proven, and what's still being argued over behind the headlines. If that's useful to you, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.